things that I really loved about this book is that it sort of inverts kind of what we're accustomed to thinking the setting as being. Like in most fiction, setting is sort of like the backdrop across which characters move. But in this book, it's the characters who are moving and the backdrop, which is central. And it really does become, the setting is the main character in this. So can you talk a bit about like what drew you to this particular plot and what you were sort of drawn to in terms of mapping out the woods, building the house, etc.
Sure. So it was a little bit of an accident, I guess, of history in that my family had come out to California to upstate New York to stay with relatives during the California fires. And we come out in fall, and really this was during COVID, so I wasn't teaching at the time. I didn't have much to do other than supervise doing school and with my children, just walk around the woods. And I think that as a Californian, I was struck by something that I think is probably very obvious for people who live in Connecticut and seeing just passing through town, seeing the number of stone walls that are around here. This is it's not new for a Californian to tell you that you have a lot of history in them. But most houses that I've lived in are younger than I am. And so to come here and all of a sudden see that walking the woods that there's this long history that preceded me, got me thinking about what would it be like to think about this history and think about the succession of individuals who occupy this landscape. And I think this idea of setting kind of becoming a character in itself wasn't there at the start. At the beginning, this was during the pandemic. I found it very hard to write. I just written short stories. A novel that had written before this had taken 14 years to write, and it was an experience I really did not want to repeat. And so I thought, like, I don't know, odds are kind of stacked against me right now. Why don't I just try to write a series of short stories and the thing that's going to link them is they're going to be set with this place. And then what I found began to happen is that they sort of didn't let each other be loose, and that the earlier stories communicated into the later stories. And I think that's how this setting began to take on a slightly different character than it usually did. I think also probably influenced by the fact that the woods are very much here. I think the word that pops to mind is the gentle. There's this kind of sense that things do things in the woods rather than they're just like this landscape. And so like a tree that's down, it influences everything else around it. But it did that. So there's kind of narrative quality to that. It makes natural elements like more more like protagonists than setting. So and that sort of partway through the book, it began to have this very different feel to me than sort of the backdrop that I usually like to.
And was that the point where you sort of realized these weren't a collection of stories, but it could be sort of a novel?
Yeah, I think that began to happen. That probably began to happen. So in the book, in the book, it goes across this period of time, and then there's also it begins in June, and it ends in June. The chapter there in between run through the fall and the winter and through the spring, and the end up in June. And so, I was sort of writing during those months, and it was sometime in the autumn when I was writing this chapter about these two twin sisters, Mary and Alice. So, I had to sort of murmur in the audience. Suggest objects of humor, and then quite tragic. So I guess if we said we're going to spoil a plot, don't have to do a book. And I guess this is on the flat copy too. So when one of them dies, and then sort of comes back, it began to think, well, maybe now that I have ghosts here, now that I have sort of the past like literally alive, there's a through line here that can continue. Because otherwise, if your characters die, eventually you have to leave them alone. But if it goes,